So I think that it's not just that I'm forcing development. Like every fall, we're going to get 8 solid weeks of just miles and miles. And I'm going to develop all of you. I'm going to make you all better. It really has more to do with, I have to provide the atmosphere by which you are developing each other, or the team alone I'm letting the team develop itself. Once that sort of philosophy really kicked in, that's when those big championships started to occur. The women's team won that first NCAA championship, and we were in the dirt floor, pole barn, no electricity, no water, right? So there was no glamour at all. And one of my stump speeches was, I put all the money on the racks. As in, I'm going to get the very best possible boats that I can get for you, because that's the thing we need in order to perform on the water.
Let's do it. So for everyone listening, we have Peter Steenstra, head coach for Bates College men's and women's program. And I'm really excited to talk to Peter because I've heard a lot about him. I know, he's been around for a long time in the coaching world. He's had amazing success up there at Bates in Maine, which we were just talking about, kind of rowing up in Maine and the rowing scene up north, and kind of as they kick off their season. But really excited to talk to Peter. I think he's going to be a great person for anyone listening, just in regards to coaching, leadership, developing a team culture, both on the men's and women's side. And I think we'll have a blast with that. But Peter, kick things off. Just tell us a little bit about your background, where you got started with coaching, and then how you landed at Bates, which I believe has been close to 20 years up at Bates, for the most part, leading the charge as the head coach. Kick things off from there. And then bridging off of that, tell us a little bit about, like, what does the first couple, you said, I think you started practice this week. What's on the horizon for you and the team as you guys kick things off? But just start a little bit with your background and let's go from there.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, absolutely. I really appreciate being here. Kevin, what you're doing is good. I think our sport needs a lot more of stuff like this. And the old guys like me can't be counted on to figure out these contraptions and whatnot. So it's really good to have people like you that are putting in this kind of effort and this kind of time. And you're clearly not just a coach yourself and a rower yourself, but you're a big fan of this sport. So, tip of the hat to you for doing something like this. It takes time and effort, and well done. So I appreciate you inviting me on, and I appreciate the fact that you're doing this to begin with. So thanks. How did I start with this? I grew up in Southwest Harbor, Maine, which is on Mount Desert Island, which is where Acadia National Park is. So if you've ever heard of Acadia National Park or Bar Harbor, that's where I grew up. And there wasn't a whole lot of rowing going on. But I ended up going to Hobart College and hadn't picked up an oar any time before that. But originally I was going to go to Hobart and maybe try joining the sailing team, because I actually did quite a bit of sailing as a younger kid. Wasn't very good at anything at all, any sport out there, which is kind of a typical story that you hear from a lot of us rowers. Is we find rowing because, quite frankly, we don't have access to it until we're older anyway. But we tend to try all the other sports, and we're never very good at any of them. And I was definitely one of those cases. So when I got to Hobart, I had a couple of the roommates on my freshman dorm that were going to the rowing meeting, and they said, you should come with us. And I thought, well, I'm going to be a sailor, but all right, I'll go to the meeting anyway. Well, I got to the meeting, of course, and I fit in with that crowd pretty quickly, whereas the sailing coach took one look at me in my 6'2" frame and 180, 85 pounds or whatever I was. And he said, I don't know why you ever thought you'd be a sailor. We sailed little boats here at college. So that conversation was very short and very direct, and I appreciate him for that. But went to the informational meeting like so many other people do, and went to the first few practices and had a really good time just meeting those members of the team. And of course, the head coach at the time at Hobart and William Smith was Jim Joy. Although I didn't really meet him for quite a while into it. And one thing that's kind of memorable, I think, is worth sharing just because it's a fun story. But my first strokes in a boat were in a boat that apparently Jimmy had, borrowed from Cornell. And it was the Stork Sanford. So it was an old wooden pocock that had the stork was on the bow. And we put it in a puddle. It was literally a puddle. It was maybe 3 boat lengths long, was this pond behind campus, which I think might even be filled in at this point, because I think they've got like senior apartments or something back there now. But we put the boat in there. I think there was something resembling a dock, and we kind of all sat in there, and everyone took a stroke this way or that and spun the boat around a few times. But that was my introduction to rowing, was in a pond up on campus that was maybe 3 boat lengths long in total. From there, I just kind of stuck with it because it was a sport that made sense to me, and it was something you could just work at, and repetition was all you needed. And being a little bit stubborn about the whole thing was something that worked for me. I would never say that I was ever very good at it, but I did make the varsity 8 there for a couple of years and felt pretty good about that. We had some fun races. We were a club team my whole time that we were there. We didn't become varsity until I think Hobart is now probably 98 or 99 is when they became a varsity team. And I graduated in 96. So we were club right up until my end. I think what got me into coaching, oddly enough, this might be somewhat unique, but in my sophomore year, I'll try to wrap up this whole story, but in my sophomore year, Mark Davis, who had started coaching at Hobart, he graduated the year prior. Mark Davis kind of said, well, Peter, you're from Maine, so you can probably drive a trailer. So I started driving the team trailer as a sophomore at Hobart. Jimmy put me in the driver's seat at the toll booth, at the Geneva toll booth, as we had left campus. So he drove from the boathouse to the toll booth, stopped the trailer, and said, you take over. And then from that point on, I drove the trailer, and he never drove the trailer again as of that day. So I think that was how I began the process of realizing that probably coaching was going to be something I was going to do in the end, was the fact that I was driving the trailer and I was having lots of conversations with Jimmy, or silent contests, as we had a lot of in the truck. We just didn't talk for 4 or 5 hours at a time. But I think that's where my conversations with him that began to be framed as a student of rowing, as opposed to just a rower trying to improve. Chatting with him about why our stroke was what it was, or why the equipment we used was what it was, or what would he want to do differently. Or he would even be asking me questions, which I look back now and realize he was digging into my young egotistical mind, and he was mining for information about the team as I'm sitting in the trailer and driving along, and probably trying to impress him with all that I knew, that kind of stuff. But no, it was, I think that really framed my thinking pattern toward what it is to become a coach, and understand that every conversation is much bigger than just the 2 people that are present. And I really enjoyed that. I really got into it. So I was, to tie in the sailing a little bit, I was a bit of a boat delivery kind of guy. I had somewhat of a captain's license going on. So when I finished college, I was delivering big sailboats and power boats for like up and down the coast from between Maine and Virginia and Florida and places like that. And then Mark Davis again, who had accepted the head coaching position at Colby in the fall for the fall of '96. He called me up and said, "I know you're not doing anything useful, so you might as well come up here and coach." So I accepted without really knowing what I was getting into, and I was 1 week late upon arrival because I had already made a commitment to deliver a big power boat down to Virginia. So I had to get the boat down to Virginia and then get back up to be at Colby. School had started, classes had begun, the roster was beginning to be assembled. It was a bunch of walk-ons were there. There was a senior who was kind of permanently injured. She was out for the year, so she was sort of covering for me to begin. And when I arrived, it was like a fresh introduction. All those first years had kind of gotten to know her as their coach, and then they realized, oh, this guy that just showed up is actually the coach. Spent 2 weeks coaching from a canoe because the launch was broken, and Mark was trying to get another outboard engine. So I guess when you look at all of it, Kevin, you can realize it was the glamour of sports and rowing that got me into coaching. There was so many great things involved. All the shiny stuff that was there. Being able to coach from a canoe up on what's Snow Pond up there at Colby was really quite a great experience. I was there for 3 years, and then I went out to Ohio State to run the club at Ohio State University for 6 years, and that was a really great experience. That club, when I arrived, it was just the men's club. It was a year or two after, like Brian Volpenheim had left to begin his training. Was what happened there. And so the team had sort of had a bit of a downward slope for maybe a year or two after that. And so I arrived and got things reorganized again, added the women's portion of the club back into it. And then we got that club back up to 100, 120 athletes fairly regularly, which is appropriate for a university that's that big. And then I ended up at Cornell for a year because I was doing a master's degree at Ithaca College, and kind of coupled that with a internship at Cornell. I started out as Dan Rook's kind of volunteer assistant coach for the heavyweight men. Did that through the fall. And then there was coaching changes that happened on the women's side. And so Hillary Gaiman became the interim head coach on the women's side, and I stepped over as the interim assistant coach for the women at Cornell for that spring. And that was a really good experience to see that Division I area, that Ivy League sort of perspective. But I knew that wasn't necessarily where I really wanted to be. There was an opportunity to stay on, but Hillary wanted to, I think, find a different coach for the group, so she ended up hiring someone else to stay on for the following year. And then I ended up here at Bates as the assistant coach for Andrew Carter was the head coach at the time, and I was the assistant for both the men's and the women's side. And again, I was attracted by all that money. I think I got $15,000 for the year, which was tall order for someone in their 30s, right? A lot of people would argue not a very good choice, but it was I guess my wife and I now look at it as a calculated risk that, we got lucky. It paid off. So we were here, and Andrew Carter moved on. He went to another position and in August, and I was looking at other jobs at that point. But then the athletic director here at Bates called and said, well, just don't make any decisions. Give me 24 hours. And so I waited till the next day. And then I was here mid-August and trying to hire staff. So that was 18 years ago now, and been here ever since.
Just a bit bridge off that. One of the things, number one, that's an awesome just kind of evolution from, college to, Maine to Ohio State to New York, then back to Maine, kind of being at Bates. But one of the funny things that stuck out to me was you turned that sophomore year boat trailer, driving opportunity actually into a potential career path after that by now shipping, taking, sailboats up and down the coast. So that's a funny, that was that internship opportunity that they gave you to drive the trailer, as a sophomore in college could have materialized into a whole different path for you. And then one of the things that's very interesting is I know just from researching Bates and then obviously Cornell and Colby, Ohio State being there for 6 years, that must have been, just in terms of the school size and the experience being there, and then bridging that into now, kind of going from a smaller school like a Hobart or, coaching at Colby to Ohio State and then back to Maine, right, with a pit stop at Cornell kind of in between. What are some things that you learned at Ohio State, kind of building that program back up to, like you said, 120 athletes that in many ways were transferable to now, at Bates and leading the charge at a significantly smaller school? What were some things that you kind of took away from that experience?
Yeah, it's hard to really outline all that I learned at Ohio State, but that was a tremendous old school blue collar learning experience. To talk about being thrown into the deep end, right? I had very little support from the university itself. The club had very little support, only a few $1,000s a year from the university, and to be able to manage that at that age, because I was only, it was my 3 years out of college at that point, with no true organizational skills prior to that. But to take on such a task that it's hard to say that I had any oversight. I had this authority above me that was a university, but they weren't really interested in giving me any guidance or instruction, or, the parameters involved were minimal at most, but there was very much a follow the rules or else was all that I got for instruction. It was a good student-run organization, which came with a whole mess of pitfalls in that. So I had captains and I had club officers, and I had one assistant coach that was sort of paid. I had, at our peak, I think we had 11 volunteer assistant coaches. So I think that in those 6 years, I learned all the stuff that you need to know, such as small, outboard motor maintenance and how to organize travel for 100 people when they're paying for it on their own, to the management of a leadership organization. And what do you do when you're sort of the final, you're the final person on any list of what needs to be done next? You're the decision maker, and it's tough to tell people what to do when they either aren't being paid because they're just pure volunteers, or they're being paid very little and have to have a second job on the side, or they are the very college students who are paying your salary. So you learn how to walk these fine lines with a lot of folks and try to find a balance, and but also be exactly what it is that they need, because what that club needed when I arrived was someone to say, I am in charge, I will make the decisions. So balancing all that out was really a great learning experience for me. And I know that a place like that Ohio State deserves to have someone who could come in and have all the answers right away. I knew enough to know that I didn't have all the answers, and I knew enough to know that I was going to learn while I was there. Because if they had the ability to get a true seasoned professional coach, then they would have had a lot more backing from the university. They would have had a lot more help to do that, but they didn't. Right. So it was a good pairing between me and that club. It worked out well. It wasn't without its growing pains, but I'm very happy with the work that we did there, the results that we had while I was there, both on the men's club side and the women's club side. And that's like, we had a women's club of 50 plus, and that was in addition to the fact that there was the full varsity program happening at the same time that was also trying to get walk-on involvement. So we had an on-campus competition for some of the bodies. So it worked out very well, and I certainly learned an awful lot. And most of what I carried from there into this position here has to do with the fact that I'm one head coach, and I have 2 assistant coaches. Even here at Bates, where the student body is only 1,800 or 1,850, I think, we have over 100 people on our roster, and that's a pretty big operation for only 3 coaches. We cover 5 whatever miles of water that we have to ourselves. We have spotty cell phone coverage and things like that when we're out there. So we've got to have pretty good communication. Even we have to have a good system in place so that even the coxswains realize the significance of their role in order to maintain safety out on the water. So I think I learned a lot from that experience at Ohio State that was really quite appropriate for what I'm doing here and what needs to be done here. So that's something that I can look back on and be pretty happy with.
And that's like really neat, because one of the things I really wanted to talk to you about was, as we kind of, turn our attention now to Bates and what you've been, continuing to build there. You're the, kind of, like you said, Bates has had, it's a well-known program, lots of success on the women's side, on the men's side. And you're the head coach, the leader of both organizations. And it's funny how that time at Ohio State in many ways probably, like you said, set you up for learning how to manage, 2 teams, but one team, but really kind of 2 teams. It's, kind of separate, right? And at the same time with, light staff and having to manage that and the communication and leadership and all these different things. Talk about, just give people an understanding of the team at Bates. Again, you as the head coach, you have your 2 coaches below you, you have a roster of, you said, give or take 100 athletes. Like, how does that dynamic kind of work? Like, in the sense of, just keeping alignment with the vision and, making sure we, the athletes are up to speed with communication, whatever, kind of direction you want to take it. But just talk a little bit about the program and maybe where it was when you first started, and then now here today, however many years later, and the systems and the processes that you guys really kind of prioritize to lead a huge team like that.
Yeah. So as I try to answer this question, I have to kind of return to that, what I learned at Ohio State, and then how I apply that here. One thing about being at Ohio State was I had zero involvement from the university, essentially. So it was just me, but I was with them year round. So we could train every single day throughout the year as part of that club. So I saw them a lot. And so I had my captains, and I had my club officers, and I had my coxswains, and I had seniors and on down. And I had my one assistant coach, and then I had all those volunteers. So it was very contained within what would be considered the boathouse. Transition to here, and aside from the early day at Colby or that one year that I had at Cornell, those two places, I was the assistant. I was not the one that had to interact with administration. So the one experience I did not have until I got to Bates was actually working with an administration. So that was the part that was new here. And I think that because of the boathouse portion of it that I learned at Ohio State, I could easily apply here because I have myself, my two assistant coaches, and I knew to structure the team in a way that the coxswains are basically part coach, part athlete. The captains are there to be communication between the team and me. They're a conduit between the two of us. We have the seniors that have this responsibility. You're the ones most invested in this current team today. You put the most effort into it, so you need to make sure the people below you're bringing them into the group, bring them into the fold, teach them everything you can. You go right on down the classes, and we work with each group kind of individually so that they understand what their particular role might be, what is the freshman role in this situation, what is the sophomore role in November, those sorts of things. So that part I was able to apply pretty easily, and I didn't have to put a lot of effort into that, aside from helping the team to understand what we were doing. For me, I was lucky to have a good athletic director at the time. He and I were very much on the same page in our thinking, so that helped a huge amount. But then I'm the one who had to learn what it is to deal with, a facilities manager or a business manager, or the business office itself, and how to communicate with everyone else on campus that is not necessarily like above me, but in another office, so that I need that office to help us out with what we're doing. And so I have to go, and you have to be polite. You have to ask, and sometimes you have information that they need, or you have responsibilities or duties that they're going to be checking up on you about. And there's compliance issues and NCAA rules and conference things, and there's so much that was new to me because I had never been within an athletic department before. So that was the stuff that I had to learn 18 years ago, and I think I'm starting to get better at it. But you'd have to ask someone here. You'd have to ask an administrator how I'm doing. But the structure of the team, I guess, in a very sloppy segue, when we are operating as an overall program, so it's two teams and one program that kind of covers the whole thing, I have to spend a lot of time talking to those tiered groups, right? We have captains meetings, maybe not regularly enough, but we have captains meetings, right? At this current year, we have 3 captains per team. So there's 6 captains total. And, we meet with them and we talk about what it is that we're trying to do over the big picture, because they're more than just one of the athletes. I depend upon them to have that role of not just, the role of leadership, but they've got to understand where it is we're trying to steer this ship. They have to be part of that. Most of this then leads itself down the path of, if we're going to be truly productive, if we're going to be efficient, we also have to make sure that safety is the first step, like safety on the water. Like I said, we've got 5 miles of water. It's all to ourselves. We have no one else out there. It is perfect and beautiful. And we can do a 22K workout and spin only twice. So it's a really gorgeous piece of water, right? And we have, we don't have anyone else out there that understands what it is that we're doing. So I understand that the places where there's a lot of rowing programs in one area, you're down there on the Schuylkill, right? That's your world. There's plenty of people that are out on the water all at the same time, and they all have an understanding of what's going on. So if a boat gets itself into a hairy situation, even if you, the coach, aren't right there with them, another coach isn't too far off and knows how to help. Whereas for us, I could be a mile away. And I have the two varsity eights off on their own. They've got to be able to help each other. They've got to be able to keep track of each other. So the coxswains that we have to understand that their role, as much as it is to motivate and drive and be a member of the team and all that, they have to always have in mind, I am a coach here as well. I am a chief safety officer primarily, and I'm in charge of these 8 lives in front of me, and I have to take care of them. So I think that's a lot of what our organization, if you boil it down, that's really what we focus on, is making sure that everyone's safe on the river.
Yeah. That's like, and it's so interesting that you say that, like, kind of that level of ownership that you probably, again, like I guess the tiers in which you kind of have the chains of communication so that things are operating smoothly, and especially on the water when you're in an area that is quite remote on the rowing side of things, or very remote on the rowing side of things, you have to, like, the coxswains are held to an even higher standard because they are, there's just in order to kind of manage the team as to be a second set of eyes as coaches, to be a second, kind of tier the leadership. And how do you guys, like, in the sense of rowing and being on the water and all these different things, like, is the structure, like, head coach, looks to, like, it, like, in terms of managing the rosters of 50, like, how do you guys kind of decide on where the priority is, in the sense of, not priority, but like where the focus is on the water and the boats, and whether that's spring is probably different than the fall. Fall might be more about development. And I do have a question about how you guys kind of built the roster and stuff like that too, which I'd be very curious about too, especially with the smaller school of 1,800, students. Yeah. But before we get to that, like, what's that level of focus and priority? Like, how do you kind of think about the votings and priority and being able to manage that when you do have only 3 coaches?
Yeah, a lot depends on how many walk-ons do we get in any given year. So let's just say that we have, like last year we had 57 first years. Wow. On the roster. I mean, it was, you could tie it into, post-Olympic year kind of thing. There was a lot of publicity for it. A lot of people were seeing it on TV. Maybe they're interested, but 57. So clearly the vast majority have never rowed before. It takes a long time just to get everyone cleared to participate. So even though we're starting from scratch with the majority of people, we're also bringing brand new, fresh bodies in 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in, 4 weeks in, right? So you're constantly having that, what can feel like an interruption, almost on a daily basis as we're going through the fall. We still maintain an open door policy no matter what. I'm happy having 50 freshmen every year. That's great. We all know it's going to boil down to half that or even fewer. And that of course, is fine. We just want to make sure that it's available for anyone who wants to try it out. How we do this with the coaching staff, knowing that there's only 3 of us, so we have the 3 safety launches out there at a time. You have to prioritize the boats that are at the highest risk. So if you have 4 pure novices, for instance, and then you have an 8 of whatever it would be called, a 4th 8 or a 5th 8 or something. Well, you don't just put those 4 novices into what would be a 6th boat and then hope they survive, right? You actually make, out of those 12 bodies, you make a top 4, something that can be on the water and be safe and keep up with the 8. And then you make what is a bottom 8. So think of it as the 5th boat is actually a 4 and the 6th boat is the 8. And what you're doing is you're just giving everyone the very best possible learning environment as much as you can. But that does mean that the assistant coach on that side, say that's the women's side, so that assistant coach is working with that 8 and that 4. Now, we just said they were the 5th vote and the 6th vote. That means I have 4 8s on the women's side, which, again, I'm happy to do it. And it's one of those it is what it is situations, but we're focusing on whatever our bottom crew is. So in that scenario, I would be focusing primarily on the 3rd and the 4th vote. And the 1V and 2V, which has the best rowers and the best coxswains, they are going to be almost entirely on their own. So we are, particularly through the fall, we are coaching from the bottom of the team up. Because all we're trying to do is raise the level of, the so-called worst athlete or the worst rower. We just want to bring them up because once we get the bottom of our team up to a certain speed, then we can start to focus in the middle of the team, which is where we want to put most of our effort. Because we get to springtime, even though I'm primarily with the 1V and the 2V, or it would be like the NCAA roster, which is 2 8s plus your spares. So those 21 folks. I may be focusing primarily on the 1V and the 2V, but I'm mostly coaching the 2V because that would be the competition side of things, but that's the pressure that is applied from that middle portion of the team up. So if we focus on fall, it's almost entirely developmental. We have just the head of the Charles is the only thing that we go to. We have a scrimmage race with Colby and Bowdoin every fall. So we all kind of just put whatever we've got out on the water and have a big race up there up at Colby, which is kind of fun. But yeah, it's trying to get everyone up to speed first and foremost for safety. And I guess if I'm going to, a side note to this conversation is the coxswains those people are the ones that I'm hardest on. Because when I'm recruiting coxswains, or one of my assistant coaches are doing all that recruiting, when they come into the office to meet me and to chat about what it would be like to be here at Bates, I tell them outright, this is a job interview. This is not this is not you looking at a college and seeing if you fit in. This is a job interview. And it needs to be understood that that's the way that this is going to be. I'm going to be hard on you because mistakes on your side mean people get hurt, as opposed to a mistake a rower gets. That one rower might get hurt, or that one rower might lose a seat or lose their position on the team or something along those lines, or make a boat slow down. But if a coxswain's making a mistake, the potential of people getting hurt is real.
That's I love like, again, that level of stress that you guys put into that as a leadership position. And one of the questions that I immediately thought of, if you had 57 first year athletes, and a school that is give or take 1,800, or a little bit over 1,800, you had the portion of the freshman class that investigated rowing, at least initially, and then probably many quit and found other activities and things like that. That's an unheard of just percentage of athletes that gravitated to rowing initially. You highlighted it a little bit before, but I kind of wanted to pivot to this direction anyway. But how does that roster building materialize, in the sense of, obviously you have coaches and they are in charge, recruiting and actively looking for athletes who have rowing experience, and then obviously coxswains is part of that roster. But then there's an emphasis, it sounds like, still on the walk-on side of things and making sure you get at some athletes that maybe have no rowing experience. What are some of the things that you look for in building that roster from the ground up, especially in the first year, from a recruiting standpoint, as well as why is rowing at Bates such a popular fall activity for so many people that they want to gravitate to it at that early in their rowing or in their college career? It's oh, I see a sign and, rowing looks like fun. I feel like that's unheard of at a lot of schools, where it's oh man, that looks exhausting, early mornings and cold weather and this and that. Talk about that, the roster construction and building it up to being a roster of that size.
All right, so the two parts are, what do we do for walk-ons and how are we attracting anyone? And then the other part is the recruiting side. So I'll start with the walk-on portion of it. We don't do any advertising. There's no club fair, like an interest fair. I mean, that does exist, but we don't do anything there. So we're not going around campus and trying to sell it. Okay. The way that I like to say this to my assistants and my upperclassmen is we're not desperate for people to be on our team, right? We just want anyone who wants to try it to come and try it. You have to have a little bit of courage to do it. So come on out and try. We're very happy to introduce this sport to anyone who's even mildly curious about the thing, because you just never know. You never know who takes on this. What we do to get those folks here is I tell the incoming first years, because they have this orientation trip that they all do at the beginning of the year. They're here a week before school actually begins. So say we have, I don't know, I think this year it's like 15 on the men's side and 13 or 14 on the women's side that are recruited kids that are coming here specifically to row. So we communicate with them before the start of their orientation trip. When you get here, as you're meeting people that are in your class, if you think they would like this sport, if you think they are looking for something that is this involved and this difficult, then you should introduce it to them. You should bring them in, bring them to the team meeting, or bring them to meet the coaches. So what we've done there is the first filter is already effective, right? It's already taken effect. Because if you as a recruited member of this team either don't want that person rowing or don't think they will enjoy it, then we've already eliminated that, that obstacle, okay, or that question mark. But we use the team itself in order to attract more folks. We have people come in the winter. We have people that maybe they play a different sport through the fall. Maybe they get injured, or maybe they just have never been a varsity athlete before, or any type of an athlete within a organized system before. But then they get to college and they realize they have a lot more time than they thought they would have. And they also realize, wow, I know I came to Maine because I wanted to get out into the wilderness, but you tend to stay right on campus and just, walk around for the most part, or go into Portland because it's our one big city close by. And they find themselves not going out and enjoying the great outdoors that Maine has to offer. So they find us in the winter. And I tell you what, the number of times I've had someone start by erging from January through February and into March, and that's their introduction to the sport, that's a kid that I want to have hanging around, because if you're 3 months into erging and then the first time you see a boat and see what the sport actually is, it's going to blow your mind. So I like having those people around, and the folks that have the courage to discover something new and just try something that makes them super uncomfortable. I really like having that kind of energy around. So the other side of this is the recruited kids. We're not doing really aggressive recruiting that I know that has always been in the Division I world. I understand that, and it makes perfect sense. A lot of that recruiting, especially on the women's side, has become international. And again, that totally makes sense. You go where the best athletes are. And it's beginning to sort of trickle down into our Division III worlds, where we're doing more recruiting. People are doing more traveling. There are just more kids out there that are finding the sport at an earlier age. There's more clubs. There's more, Row New York and Row Boston, and all these other clubs that are existing, which is absolutely fantastic. And I hope that doubles from where it is now. But so far, that's just not necessarily our approach, which is to go to all these recruiting events and sell baits. I think, and maybe this will change. I mean, I have been here a long time, so I'm only getting older and lazier, but I think that our system represents itself well enough. We have enough people that know Bates that are out there coaching or out there teaching at private schools or still involved in rowing in various ways, that the word of mouth is probably still our best recruiting device. And so, again, the student who's in high school, who is looking around for where they want to go, if they are curious about Bates, then that's the kind of kid that I want. Someone who isn't just coming because of name recognition or because someone's grandparent went there. If that's your only motivation, then I don't think it's going to be a great fit. But if you're curious about what it is to be an athlete on this team at this college, because of all the pieces of the puzzle that are this college and this program, then that's a great combination to have. And if you happen to be good at rowing on top of it, then it's a bonus for us.
And with that, one of the things that is interesting to me is, again, like I love that approach of, kind of in many ways, the program speaks for itself. There's a lot of people out there who speak highly of it and, kind of finding athletes who truly want to be there. And one of the things that's interesting that I wanted to talk about as well was, like you guys have had success at the highest level of Division III rowing, both on the women's side and the men's side, just both teams operating really, really highly. And obviously the women's team winning multiple national championships and all these different things. Like, when did that start to materialize? When did that start to, develop? I know, kind of when I was, kind of on the website before, always competitive, at least on the women's side. I've raced the men's side, when I was, down in Philly at St. Joe's. Lots of success there. And to have an approach on the recruiting side based a lot off of, just the program and the word of mouth and the coaches, like you guys are obviously doing something right to develop these athletes to compete at the highest level. I mean, just this past spring, I think the men finished third at the IRA, and they were 3 or 4 seconds off of, winning or something like that. Like, you got to produce some pretty fast competitive athletes in order to put yourself in the ranks. In order to win Division III, like, you got to be ultra competitive, serious athletes who work hard. Like, where does that emphasis on development come from to get these athletes who are finding Bates, want to be there? And then you're actually, you and the other coaches and the program around you are helping to get them to the point where they're able to compete at the highest level within their specific division. Like, where does that emphasis on development and getting these athletes up to speed come from?
Well, when you go back to the ownership aspect of it and the fact that they themselves are very invested in what they're doing, and then we talk about development, I think there's a nuance to development that I'm not going to say that I realized this early on, but I have started to see that if I'm going to find the advantage in being understaffed and overwhelmed with athletes, there's a difference between me, like the coaches, forcing development or letting development happen. So what does that mean? What that means is we now have a number of years. We're probably a decade into having the athletes themselves are doing most of the, I don't know that I should say coaching, but they are working so well within their own boats and their own teams. There's a lot of care that happens on the team. I as the 3 seed in the varsity 8, have to care about the guys that are in the fourth 8. I have to care. I can't just be like, well, I'm in the V8 and that's what matters. I got to put all my effort into that. Yeah, of course, a huge amount of your effort's into that. But if you don't care at all about the guys that are in the fourth 8, then whatever you've worked towards is going to dwindle the day that you're gone. And it's going to dwindle quickly. So I think that it's not just that I'm forcing development. Like, every fall, we're going to get 8 solid weeks of just miles and miles. And I'm going to develop all of you. I'm going to make you all better. It really has more to do with, I have to provide the atmosphere by which you are developing each other, or the team alone I'm letting the team develop itself. Once that sort of philosophy really kicked in, that's when those big championships started to occur. The women's team won that first NCAA championship, and we were in the dirt floor, pole barn, no electricity, no water, right? So there was no glamour at all. And one of my, stump speeches was, I put all the money on the racks, as in, I'm going to get the very best possible boats that I can get for you, because that's the thing we need in order to perform on the water. And if I have to start a generator, if I have to run up the hill in the dark in order to start the generator so some lights come on so that we can actually get the boats into the boathouse, I'm happy to do that if it means we have a higher quality boat. So reminding myself to be a custodian for this team and for our facility, just as much as I am the head coach and the face of the program in that sense. Everything that I do needs to be focused on providing an atmosphere for this team so that it can develop itself. And I think that that's where we've been for a while, which is, it might sound like I'm trying to relieve myself of responsibilities and things, but really that's the reason we can have a program that's 4, 5, 8 deep on both sides, because there's no way I can talk to all of them. All right? Even with 3 coaches, you can't talk to all of them enough and give everyone the time that they need. But they get a lot of time with each other in the dining hall or the erg room itself, or in the vans between campus and the boathouse. They're getting a lot of time together, in the libraries or even in their dorms and off-campus houses. They're sitting around talking about rowing all the time, which is educational in so many ways. If you have a junior sitting there and shooting the shit with a freshman at the dining hall, and you're sitting there for an hour and a half at the end of eating a big meal after practice, that's something that I can't do. I cannot provide that education that is being passed along from the junior to the freshman. But over time, we've created that atmosphere where that is able to happen, and that's something that I think we're pretty happy with.
And I think again, like, it comes back to just a lot of the structure of the program. It sounds like is giving athletes a level of autonomy where they are self-driven, in many ways self-coaching, and willing to get kind of internally motivated, and also charitable in the sense of, like, they're passing that along to the underclassmen, and that's kind of how the culture developed. And I think, like, again, like, those are probably pillars that you guys lean on that creates a repeatable system and program every single year. You're kind of having athletes who are internally motivated and passing it along year after year to kind of have that success. What just when you guys talk about, like, alignment of the visions and the programs, and kind of, is a lot of that as two separate programs? Is that as kind of one full unit with the women's program and the men's program? Like, is a lot of, like, the training and the workouts very similar to one another, or do the captains on the women's side come up with different goals than the men's side? You have to kind of cater some of that to them. Like, just that team dynamic, I think, is quite interesting for a lot of people who are probably listening, who have, they are the boathouse director and this and that, and they have to manage a roster of that size and differing, speeds and visions and all these different things. Like, how does all that piece work?
Yeah. I leave it up to the captains quite a bit to come up with the goals of the team. They're the ones that are, like I said, sitting in the dining hall or sitting in the dorm rooms and chatting about what they want to do this year. So who better to come up with what's an actual attainable goal than the athletes themselves. So I leave a lot of that up to them. The training that we do and the schedule that we have, I have no choice but to kind of keep them the same. Luckily, the two teams have always been sort of on par with each other. They're in the same realm of training needs, and they're at the same skill level for the most part. So when we're doing, a hard workout on Tuesday afternoon on the water, both teams are doing it, because if it works out well, I can have, 3 men's eights and 3 women's eights doing the same workout together. Again, I'm very lucky to have a big piece of water, long stretch. We have 5,000 meters, 7 boats wide, straight line. Like, not too many people have something like that. So I can have 6 eights side by side and doing 4K pieces together. Send them out in different intervals and stuff, and, cat and mouse kind of things. They're chasing each other around. So there's a lot that I do in order to create that atmosphere of a boat is just a boat, and you want to try to beat it if you can. You want to try to catch it, or you want to try to pull away from it. Obviously, the women have benefited greatly from this over the years, and having the women's varsity 8 from time to time get a hold of the men's 3V, or even nipping at the heels of the men's 2V. This is, that's something that is really great. Maybe it sounds like it might be better for one side more so than the other, but one of the guys years ago had his arm around one of the guys from the 3V and said, "Look, this is just part of the tradition around here. Every now and then you're going to get nipped by the women's 8, and you're just going to have to understand that it's a very fast women's 8." So it's that kind of stuff that again, it's part of that built-in culture. And it helps to have them doing many of the same workouts at the same time, because they are getting together in the dining hall and they're talking about it. You don't want one group to feel as though the other group is being trained differently because they're better. Or you don't want to feel as though he isn't training us the same way because we're not as good as them, right? You want both groups to be trained equally, or at least the same approach, with the same information and same strategies, so that when they are together on campus and they're just talking about it, they're able to say things like, "Yeah, we really struggled with that workout," or "Boy, we heard you guys really, really nailed that thing. That was awesome," right? So when they're doing that in the dining hall and stuff, it really is beneficial to everybody. So there's the other side of this, and if I'm going to be honest, I'm limited capacity here. I've only got so much in this brain, and I can't complicate things too much for myself, because then I'll just make mistakes and screw it all up. So it's easier for me if everyone's doing relatively the same thing.
I love it. Honestly, like, I think it's really good to kind of like have that, and again, you have the body of water to be able to do it, and to be able to have the, simplify things in many ways where it doesn't have to be overcomplicated. And I think two more questions. I want to be conscious of your time here, but one of the things I'm very curious about is, again, I've Bates, Maine. I know you guys said you practice and you're on the water in the afternoons at least. Like, talk a little bit about. I got 2 questions. Like, and maybe I'll get to. I have one that I'll come to after. But like, talk about training, like, and rowing in Maine as a Division III college rower who is competing at the highest level of Division III. Like, when I think of Maine, even down here in Philadelphia, I think, like cold wilderness. I'm a warm weather person, so everywhere, south of Philly or north of Philly is cold to me. But like, just talk a little bit about like that. Like, what is the emphasis in the training? Like, do you guys spend a lot of time on the ergs indoors? What does the water time look like? Does it start to get, again, afternoons is probably a huge advantage where you're not dealing with the, 30s and 40s in the morning in October. So talk about training in and rowing in Maine at Bates specifically, and then also maybe bridging that into like what does the winter look like? I know with Division III there is that period of time where you have to have some separation from the athletes with coach to athlete direct coaching. What does that like what does February, March look like as you guys are getting ready for spring? Like, with a body of water, does it freeze over? Like what's the emphasis on the ergs? Take that wherever you want, but just shed a little light on that, because obviously it's not a disadvantage to a lot of the athletes who aspire to go there, who are like pumped up when you have a roster that big and competitive and 6'8" across. Obviously there's a lot of people who are attracted to that. Paint that picture for us.
Yeah, well, it begins with throughout the recruiting process, we're not candy coating anything. Okay, if anything, I'm going to tell you it's worse than it really is. Again, I'd rather have courageous and curious and daring people. That's what I want up here. Our falls, like right now, it is the most beautiful rowing you've ever seen. I encourage you to someday, Kevin, come up and visit and come out for a boat ride. You will be blown away, right? It is gorgeous water all the time. It is sunshine. The practice starts at 65 degrees. Practice ends at 55 degrees. We get deeper into October and it gets dark fast. If we have a cloudy day, it's dark at 4. Not super dark, but dark enough that we head into the dock a little bit earlier. November, December, January, there's no organized practice at all. And you just had better be an athlete on your own. And you've got to work with your teammates to stay active and to do things. And we encourage people to do stuff that isn't rowing. I don't want you to just erg year round. I am a huge proponent of go find cross-country skiing. Go downhill skiing if you want to. I just want people to be active. And if you're coming to Maine, you'd better figure out how to be active and enjoy the outdoors when it's cold, when it's snowing, because that's a lot of what we do in the wintertime. And I want people snowshoeing. I want you just running, or it doesn't take a whole lot to get out there and find something to do, because you have to be an outdoors person to begin with. So that's something that we encourage quite a bit. I'm not super good at encouraging people to play like basketball and stuff like that, because people tend to get hurt playing basketball and other games. And we're not the best at cutting hard and changing direction quickly, but they do it, and I want them to be active. I want them to do what they want to do. Because we count days now instead of, we used to count weeks back in the old system. Now we count days. The only good thing for us is that means we can start erging a little bit earlier in February. Our academic schedule allows us to go to Florida in the third week of February, when most of our D3 friends aren't going until sometime in March. So we get to erg a few days before we go down to Florida, get some rowing done. No selection is happening while we're there, because that's still third week of February. So again, it's another pure development thing. We just get some rowing done. Come back, and sometimes we're indoors for a whole nother month to 6 weeks. Other years, like a couple of years ago, we actually had the docks in on March 6th. Who knows? It can be different every year. But even when we do get the docks in early, it doesn't mean it's going to be great rowing. I think last spring, everyone experienced what we experienced, which was every Saturday was absolutely rough. And throughout the middle of the week, it was hot or cold sort of weather conditions all of last spring. But spring was tough this past year, but it was for most everybody. We don't get the dramatic flooding that folks that are on the Connecticut River, for instance, that deal with that. There's a lot of people that are dealing with their water that fluctuates greatly. Sure, we tend to have ice later than most, but our river is never so tumultuous that we can't be out on it because of water conditions themselves. So once we do get on the water, we're pretty good. pretty solid. And oddly enough, I think it was, I don't remember the year. It was 2018 was the first time we were allowed to go to IRA. And so Bates was the first NESCAC school to go to the IRA in an 8. So, de facto championship in that sense, only because we were the only AQ to do it. And then we beat all the other so-called D3s that were there at the time. I think it was that year that we didn't even get on the water until the week before our President's Cup, which is us and Colby and Bowdoin. And that's just the week before New England. So here we are, the 4th week of April, or third week of April. We're finally getting on the water here at our own boathouse. So things like that happen, and it doesn't always make sense as to why we're fast on any given year, because it doesn't seem to necessarily correlate with when we're on the water or when we're not. There is benefit to being on the erg for a while, but being on the erg too much can lead to injuries. So we try to find that balance even early on and not overdo it if we can avoid it. I'm not even sure I remember exactly where your question was at the beginning, but I think that's where we're going, right?
Yeah. And bridging off of that, like you highlighted it before, but you highlighted it with the men and qualifying for the IRA. And one of my questions that I wanted to ask anyway was and this kind of was related to the number of athletes that you have and the attraction that is Bates rowing, both on the men's and women's side. I think I read before, you guys are, the women's team is the only team at Bates to win an NCAA championship. And, for Division III, athletics, it sounds like, at least according, and you've won 5 of them, right? What is the attraction, kind of up that way to the rowing program, in your eyes, right? Again, kind of one of my last questions here, but what do you feel like is one of the big things that attracts all these people when you describe it? It's hey, we're indoors for quite a time. We have, we go out, we work hard, and it's high intensity work, and sometimes we're rowing in the dark, sometimes it's the best rowing scene you're ever going to see in your life. What would you kind of say are some of the pillars that attract so many athletes to the program in order to have the success that you guys have had as a program out up in Maine that's winning, that wins national championships and medals at the NCAAs and IRAs and all these different things? What would you kind of say are some of the big pillars of that?
Yeah, adventurous spirit is probably the starting point. We've had some very good assistant coaches over the years that have done a good job recruiting. We're very honest and straightforward with our recruiting process. We're never telling anyone that, that you're a shoe-in or you're definitely going to get in. None of that ever happens. And we're not even recruiting based on anything like erg scores. It's not that I'm not interested in your erg score. It's just that I know that really doesn't define who you are. And more importantly, it doesn't define if you're going to be successful here. Because what we need here are people who want to have that adventure, in a sense. They're coming to a place that feels a little bit off the map from the Boston and the New York and the Philly and the DC sort of area, right? It feels far away. I mean, you mentioned it too, right? Anything north of Philly, and you're like, ooh, I bet it's cold up there. Whereas, for us, we want people to understand that this is a destination school. You're coming here not because it's on the way to something. We are the thing that you're going to. This is a place you want to be because you have a little bit of courage and you have that spirit of curiosity and you want to try that out. And I think that once you are here and you meet the team, I think the team is what sells it, and the team is what they speak for themselves. I've been here so long that a lot of it, everyone tries to tie it in with me, and I don't think it's me, other than the fact that it's the continuity of me. I've been here consistently for all that time, and I think that only helps with any program. The longer you have that head coach in position, the better off the team's culture is going to be, because things are so predictable, to the point that you have people that graduated 10, 12, 15 years prior, and they come back and they recognize what the workout's going to be. They have an idea of what you're doing on Tuesday afternoon or Monday morning lift, or they know one of the three things that are going to happen on Saturday. If it's late September or early October, they have an idea. So that's something that can be shared between those individuals. So those moments when you do meet, say you're a high school kid and you're looking around for what school do you want to be a part of, and then you just happen to meet one of those Bates alums who might be from the class of 2012, and you hear about the experience they had there. Maybe that interests you in going to visit. So you go visit Bates, and you go up to the campus and you meet the team, and you realize, wow, everything that alum from 2012 said, I'm hearing from the same people here. And that makes you realize that there's an atmosphere that is this program, that is this boathouse. And there's a culture that is the school itself. It is a very happy place. To keep it simple, we've always referred to it as it's a first choice school. And what I mean by that is the people that are here, this was their first choice. They're very excited to be here. It's a very happy place. So you add the courageous and adventurous spirit, and then surround it or encapsulate it into a very happy place, and good things tend to happen.
I love that. That's awesome. And I think that's definitely a great selling point of Bates. Again, just by the nature of who, the school and the program and the culture that's been established. Last thing I want to do is I just want to pivot a little bit as we wrap things up. I know one of the things that I really wanted to talk to you about was you guys do the conference down, the Steenstra conference with rowing coaches, and I was on the website. I haven't been yet. I'm actually looking at it, and want to get up there as soon as possible because it looks really awesome on the website. But the Steenstra rowing conference, for rowing coaches, just finishing things up here. But where did that materialize for you and kind of starting that? And I'm huge around coaching education. That's actually part of why this podcast even exists. I love having those conversations because it's a self-education platform for me, talking to people like yourself or anyone. But obviously having a destination for a lot of coaches to go and network and learn from each other. Yeah. What was the motivation behind that piece, adding that into, what is already a busy schedule as a head coach of two programs? What motivated, kind of, and brought that to life, going into however many years you guys been running it? But just talk about that a little bit, shed some light on that, and just the importance of coaching education and why that may have motivated you to, have this, what seems to be an amazing event.
Sure. Well, yeah, thanks for bringing it up, and you should come up. So let's pack up your microphone and your laptop. Yep. And come on up. All right. So we'll get you up there so you can see it. But yeah, last year we had 200 coaches, and this year we're already on track for maybe 220 to 240-ish. Coaches will be there of all levels and age groups and whatnot. So it's really a good collection. Well, how it began, we'd have to go back to the beginning of Hobart. Jimmy Joy had started the conference. He called it the Joy of Sculling, and he had started one even earlier than Hobart, but he had started one back when he was at Wesleyan, I think. So he was coaching there, and he had a little conference going at Wesleyan. I don't even know how long ago this is. We're talking like the 70s or 80s or something. Then he was up in Canada for a number of years, and he helped to establish a conference up there in Canada. Came to Hobart William Smith and began the conference there in 1993. So the same year that I started driving the trailer, I was helping Jimmy, stuff 3-ring binders and whatnot for the conference. And I didn't do much more than just go over to the house, me and a couple other of my teammates, and literally made all the 3-ring binders for all the attendees, and then got a great meal from Seal Joy, his wife. So that's where it began. I worked with Jimmy on his conference throughout my college career, and then after that, when I was coaching at Colby, and then a little bit, the first year at Ohio State, but I couldn't afford to get back from Ohio to be at the conference, so I was away from it for those 5 or 6 years. Mark Davis, of course, was a big piece of that conference back then as well, and I think he probably stayed with it during the years that I was at Ohio, so he was more involved during that period. Then when I got back here to Bates, it was Mark and I were sort of full-on co-directors for Jimmy. We helped Jimmy out for a number of years. He was looking for a way to retire and end anyway. So he ended up, the timing actually ended up being pretty good, because 2019 was his final. And then of course, COVID happened. So it didn't even happen for a couple more years. Jimmy passed away last year, and it was, where are we now? This is 25. So in 23, I gave Mark a year to decide if he wanted to do it on his own or I should do it. And so I ended up taking it on, but Mark, of course, is still very involved. And I'm not sure if you know Mark Davis, but he's out at Pocock Wrong Foundation. He's also the Seattle prep coach right now. So he's out there on the West Coast, but he's pivotal with the conference. He's the one who organizes all the presenters and everything. So this is now our third year of sort of reestablishing or revamping what was the Joy of Sculling, but it is now just called the Conference for Rowing Coaches, because I'm not really all that clever and creative about coming up with fun names. So that's why I referred to it as just the conference. But the motivation behind it, I think, was your question in there. But we all do something. Like, a great example is you are doing this podcast. No one asked you to do it. You just knew that this was a thing you wanted to do, but more importantly, something you could do. For me, I know that a lot of other coaches are working at camps, or they run their own camp, or they're helping with the national team, or they're helping with some other youth organization in their area. Most of us are doing something in some way to give back to the sport. And others are very involved in, say, NCAA or with U.S. rowing itself, or trying to help on the organizational side of it. This conference is the thing that I know I can do, and Mark Davis knows he can do. And now Lizzie Mitchell, right? She knows she can do. This is the stuff this is my way of being able to do something that gives back. Coaching education I didn't realize it, to be quite honest. I didn't realize how important it was to me early on, but I am from a long line of teachers and preachers, the Steenstras long before me, so it makes perfect sense that I'd be coaching for one thing, but also finding myself in this position to be helping to educate more coaches in our sport. So it's something that it's a true labor of love, and it's not like I'm going to retire with a big yacht at the end of this or anything, but I really enjoy doing it, and I know that it's something that is needed. A lot of people go to the conference and really enjoy it and come away really refreshed and ready. Some come away totally saturated with information and don't know what to do with it, so they got to get back to their boathouses and get a couple of erg pieces in before they start to assess all the information that they took on. But it's a very fun weekend where we have huge manufacturers like Hudson and Vespoli and Wintech are involved. We have C2 there and NK, and we also have some of the smaller guys that are involved. X-Boat is coming this year, and we have I'm not going to be able to name them all off the top of my head, but rival kit. And, there's various companies that are all involved in the sport, and they're part of the conference just as much as the attendees are. So we work hard to keep the price reasonable, and we work hard to get the best kind of presenters that we can. We have some returners from one year to the next, but we also try to keep it fresh. And on top of that, we try to bring in first timers. So every year there's someone who's never presented before, or at least never at the conference. Bringing in young coaches and a well-balanced presentation staff. And then on top of that, like what Mitch is doing, Lizzie Mitchell. Sorry, I call her Mitch just because that was her nickname forever for me. But, she is really running with this women in coaching conversation, which really is what was nothing more than just an hour that was set aside in order to provide a space for that to happen, where all the female coaches, female identifying coaches could be present and in the same place at the same time and just talk about whatever needed to be done. Well, Mitch has taken that even further and created that monthly Zoom meeting, or, brought in some guest speakers and, even administrators and stuff. So it's really taking on its own meaning under the umbrella that is the conference. And I couldn't be more happy than for what's going on with that. And, we know that we're doing the right thing. I'm not trying to influence anything with any particular agenda that I have. We've had speakers that I would disagree with on a few things, but we still want to make sure that we're representing all of rowing to the best that we can. And I think of this as I'm just providing this location where everyone that wants to be involved can come and talk about rowing and just be a huge rowing nerd.
I love it. That's awesome. And I think, you're definitely sold me on. I'm getting on the website as soon as we log off here. And yeah, I think I totally want to come. That's awesome. And Coach and Lizzie Mitchell's, just from literally a year ago, she was on here, talking about BU and all that. And I could just tell like her energy is infectious when it comes to just talking about, I'm sure that area with the women's conference, but also just, as a coach and as a leader. So obviously some great people involved in it. But no, Peter, this was awesome. This was a ton of fun. I want to be conscious of your time. Like I could talk all day about some of these topics. This is a blast for me. I want to make sure that we, are conscious of you guys as you get your season up and running, just getting started now. But thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything like website, if athletes are interested in Bates and want to reach out, like I'm sure, websites and recruiting coordinators, all that on there, like any last things that we need to know in order to, if people listening are curious to learn more about Bates?
There's a reason why I have two assistant coaches that do all the recruiting, because I'm a terrible salesman. So I can tell you that Greta O'Hara and Hannah Fitz are ready to chat with anyone who's curious at all about what it would be to row here. We'd love to have them.
Awesome. Well, Peter, thank you so much for coming on. Good luck as you guys get going with the season, both on the men's side and the women's side. I know you're going up to the head of the Charles. I will be up there or down to the head of the Charles from where you are. So, I'm going up, you're going down from Maine. So I'll be sure to seek you out and connect, up there if we can align in any way. But good luck as you guys get started with the season, and thank you so much for coming on. This is a blast.
Great. Thank you very much for having me.